Will the USA allow Saudi Arabia to join Brics? South African President Cyril Ramaphosa returned from Riyadh with news that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had expressed his country's intention to join Brics. This is not such a surprise, as Argentina and Iran also announced the same in the spring. At this point, we will need to think up more and more complicated acronyms for the expanding association, but that's not the point. The excitement around Brics is a sign of the changes taking place in the world. Welcome to another episode of Brics Digest. We bring you news, innovation and development surrounding the Brics nation and their activities around the world. In this video, we will look at Saudi Arabia interest to join Brics, a brief history on the group, what it means for the group and how Saudi Arabia joining it may affect the USA. Let's get started. So, what is Brics, and how did it start and what's the purpose? This group of countries, originally called BRIC, is an artificial construct, invented at the turn of the century by Goldman Sachs analyst, Jim O'Neill. The union was long viewed primarily through an economic prism, but this perception did not imply the eventual real-world approachment of the states involved. They are very different, far from each other, they do not need a common framework to enhance economic cooperation, and everything could be done on a bilateral level. Also, the growth rate, which was the initial reason for bringing these countries together, changed. As could have been expected, the upswings were followed by downswings of varying types. The concept would have remained an amusing afterthought, had it not been reimagined. Since 2006, Brics has been the format for regular meetings at a ministerial and the highest political level. As the political community emerged, a criterion was formed of its own accord, that Brics, a group of countries with full sovereignty, is able to pursue fully independent policies. This implies not only political autonomy but also the economic potential to realize this goal, one that can't be attained by very many of the world's countries. In the West today, only the United States seems to have such a right. The rest of the bloc, even the most economically developed ones, voluntarily limit their political sovereignty, due to participation in alliances. That said, the mere fact of a technical union of sovereigns did not in itself produce a new framework. Attempts to stimulate economic ties within Brics were not met with huge enthusiasm, and ideas to turn the group into a formalized counterbalance to the G7 did not resonate, because links to the West were crucial for all its members. However, this situation has changed. The events of 2022, initiated by Moscow, have clearly divided the world into a Western part that rallies against Russia, and the others that takes a wait-and-see approach. The West used the entire arsenal of pressure at its disposal to punish Moscow and demonstrate how disobedience is punished. The result was quite unexpected. All the other countries, especially the big BRIC states or those claiming a role in the world of their own, not only distanced themselves from joining the Western campaign but outright rejected it, despite the fact that such a stance carries the risk of repercussions from the US and its allies. Of course, this is not a matter of supporting Russia's actions, but rather of rejecting forms of external pressure. And since this is systemic in nature and related to the peculiarities of the world order, ways to counter it require a change in the latter. This is where it became clear that Brics has considerable potential. It might be a rather fuzzy grouping, but it's better prepared than anything else for those interested in alternative schemes of international order. The aforementioned full sovereignty is a prerequisite for these options. Thus, participation in Brics becomes a sign of belonging to a world that is emerging beyond established Western dominance. And it does not necessarily have to be about confrontation. It is much more valuable to be able to bypass Western institutions and reduce the risk of interaction with them. For example, by building parallel ways of conducting financial, economic, and trade relations without relying on US or EU-controlled instruments. A centralized international system, led by a hegemon, is bound to end anyway. This will happen, regardless of how the Ukraine conflict ends. And, thus, a diversity of formats will be in high demand. The new circumstances will open up prospects for Brics. What it means to the groups. The Brics alliance is eager for KSA to join. Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly stated his support for Saudi Arabia's membership in the Brics group, citing the country's policy and promising plans to diversify its economy, as well as its dominant position in the oil markets. At the same time, Beijing emphasizes that Brics is not a closed alliance or an exclusive circle, but a big family of mutual support and partnership for win-win cooperation. All economic reports highlight the strength of the Saudi economy, which had the second-best economic performance among G20 countries in the third quarter of last year, with a quarterly growth rate of 5.7%. According to the National Labor Observatory's report, Saudi Arabia also ranked first in labor force growth rate, outperforming the G20 countries between 2012 and the end of 2021. According to the Saudi General Authority for Statistics, the Saudi economy grew by 8.6% in the third quarter of 2022, compared to the same quarter in 2021, while the International Monetary Fund, IMF, predicted that the Saudi economy would grow by 7.6% this year, the best growth rate among the G20. According to economist Ayman Fouda, Saudi Arabia is a strong addition to any economic alliance in the world today. This was evident during the Russian-Ukrainian war, when world capitals turned to it for help in resolving Europe's energy crisis, emphasizing that the kingdom always takes the decision that serves the well-being of its people and the growth of its economy. In just 2 decades, trade between Saudi Arabia and China has increased more than 22 times, from $3 billion in 2000 to $67 billion in 2020, with Beijing now becoming SA's primary trading partner. The trade balance is in Riyadh's favor by about $11 billion, with $39 billion of exports to Beijing and $28 billion of imports in 2020. According to Fouda, the Brics countries have recently given Saudi Arabia the status of dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Riyadh is the primary source of crude oil supplies to China. The 2 countries also have joint investments in the Belt and Road project, as well as in integrated refining and petrochemical complexes. They hope to enhance cooperation in the energy sector supply chains by establishing a regional center for Chinese factories to take advantage of Riyadh's unique location between 3 continents. Riyadh's desire to join is quite remarkable. Of course, a country with control over significant material resources and the ability to regulate global pricing can afford independent behavior and choose comfortable partners who do not impose a series of conditions on interaction. What this means for USA. Earlier in October, the 13-nation OPEC Plus and its 10 allies infuriated the White House by resolving to cut output by 2 million barrels per day, beginning in November, fueling fears that oil prices may spike. I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind. But there will be consequences, U.S. President Joe Biden told CNN. Biden would not specify which choices were being evaluated, although the White House had previously stated that Biden was reassessing connections between allies. U.S. National Security Council spokesman, John Kirby, told CNN that the president's been very clear that this is a relationship that we need to continue to reevaluate, that we need to be willing to revisit, adding that certainly in light of the OPEC decision, I think that's where he is. Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir denied all allegations that OPEC Plus's decision was directed at the U.S. and stated that its aim was to stabilize the global market amid a slowing economy. Additionally, U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, said on October 16 that U.S. President Joe Biden had no plans to meet with MBS on the sidelines of the G20 summit coming up next month in Indonesia. It is also worth noting that consequently to the above-mentioned disagreements, the head organizer of the Saudi Investment Conference, Davos in the Desert, said on October 17 that no invitations will be sent to U.S. government officials to attend the conference, which will be held at the end of October, adding that it is to prevent the gathering from becoming a political platform. The decision not to invite U.S. officials, contrary to previous years, comes as tensions escalated between Washington and Riyadh over the recent decision of the OPEC Plus organization to reduce oil production by up to 2 million barrels per day, starting on November 2022. Richard Attias, CEO of the non-profit organization in charge of the event, the Future Investment Initiative FII, said that up to 400 CEOs of U.S. companies are expected to participate in this year's edition. According to a Beijing-based international relations expert who requested anonymity, the U.S. intended Saudi Arabia to listen to its directives and satisfy its demands, but the unfolding of events clearly indicated that Washington had overplayed its hand. According to the analyst, the U.S. is selfish in its dealings with Saudi Arabia, and the idea of joining Brics shows Saudi Arabia's growing autonomy in its diplomacy with Washington. The expert further noted that joining Brics will also protect Saudi Arabia's own energy interests in a substantive way, rather than being a card to be used by others. As stated by the Beijing-based expert, if Saudi Arabia joins Brics, it would be a promotion to the Middle East countries to strengthen their ties with Brics countries, and weaken the intervention and influence of the U.S. in the area. The oil for security framework between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. needs to be adjusted in light of the evolving international situation, according to Li Xiaoxian, director of the China Institute for Arab Studies at Ningxia University, who spoke to the Global Times. The Middle East has a clearly elevated position in the world, Europe depends on it for energy, Russia takes notice to it, and China has strong links with it, with the Belt and Road Initiative, but the Saudis do not feel equality and mutual respect in a US-led framework, Li claimed. So, do you think Saudi Arabia joining Brics will be a big loss for the USA? Let us know in the comments section. Also, like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this.